The day my yacht went under the water looked like liquid gold. The sunset was perfect if you ignored the $15 million boat sinking right in front of me. Pieces of polished teak silk curtains and crushed champagne bottles floated across the marina like confetti from someone else's celebration. At the end of the dock stood Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, blazer pink as bubblegum pearls, glistening clipboard in hand. She smiled like she'd just saved the world. "Your yacht violates community standards," she said. "It's too big. You'll thank us later." I didn't shout. I didn't even move. I just watched the Odyssey disappear beneath the surface, listening to the creak of twisted metal and the seagulls screaming above. They thought they'd humiliated me, sunk my pride, my peace, my life's work. But what Karen didn't know was simple. She'd just destroyed a yacht sitting on my dock in my marina. Before I tell you how it all started, comment your city and time zone below, and make sure to subscribe. You won't believe what happened next. They say a man's boat reflects his soul. If that's true, then the Odyssey was my second chance at life. I built her from scratch, 48 feet of polished steel teak decks glowing like honey, every inch designed to defy the chaos I'd spent 20 years working in. I was done with deadlines, boardrooms, and contractors who never called back. After decades as a naval engineer, I'd finally retired to the coast of Florida, planning to live the quiet life: sunrise, coffee, sea breeze, no more noise. When I first saw the Baycrest Marina, it looked like a postcard. The water glimmered blue as glass, and the air smelled of salt and sunscreen. Families strolled the boardwalk, kids feeding pelicans, retirees chatting about fishing licenses. It was paradise until I met the people who claimed to protect it. They called themselves the Baycrest Homeowners Association, a small board of retired executives, self-proclaimed community guardians, and one woman who ruled them all, Karen Whitmore. Mid-50s tan lines shaped like entitlement, and a voice that could shatter calm seas. She wore pastel suits every day, drove a white Lexus, and carried a clipboard like it was the Constitution. Her perfume smelled like authority and bad decisions. When I first docked the Odyssey, she appeared within minutes, heels clicking against the pier like a metronome of disapproval. "You must be the new owner," she said, peering over her sunglasses. "Lovely boat. Shame it's enormous." I smiled. 75 feet of craftsmanship. She's registered, licensed, insured, and perfectly legal. Karen pursed her lips as if I'd insulted her garden. "This marina is part of a community. We value aesthetics, modesty, proportion. It's about balance." "Balance," I repeated, watching her glance at her reflection in the yacht's chrome railing. "Sure, I'll keep her balanced." That was our first encounter, and I could already tell I'd just become her personal project. Within days, the letters started arriving. Violation notice number 001, your vessel obstructs the scenic view of Lot 17. Violation notice number 002, noise complaint due to excessive generator operation at 6:42 p.m. Violation notice number 003, visual disharmony, vessel exceeds acceptable aesthetic parameters. Acceptable aesthetic parameters, they actually wrote that. I'd seen military contracts written with less nonsense. Still, I tried to play nice. I attended an HOA meeting at the clubhouse, where Karen presided like a queen addressing her subjects. The room was full of homeowners clutching coffee cups and nodding at whatever she said. I sat quietly until she brought up Agenda Item 3, the yacht problem. She turned to me with that practiced smile. "Mr. Hayes, we all appreciate your enthusiasm for the sea, but your vessel is overwhelming. It casts shadows on other docks. It affects resale value. We kindly request you remove or replace it." "Replace a $15 million yacht," I almost laughed. "Karen," I said, keeping my tone calm, "I have every permit and approval. My berth lease was signed before this meeting. The marina guidelines don't specify size limits." Her smile tightened. "We'll see about that." From that day on, I became public enemy number one. They'd stop by unannounced for inspections. They fined me for unsanctioned decorative lighting because my deck lights were blue instead of white. One afternoon, I came back to find a bright orange sticker slapped on my gangway: "Notice of non-compliance, immediate action required." I peeled it off and taped it to my fridge like a trophy. Still, it wasn't just about me. Karen began spreading the story that my yacht was a safety hazard, that it leaked oil, blocked the waterway, scared away fish. Soon, neighbors whispered when I walked by. Someone even left a note on my truck windshield: "Move your boat before we make you." But what truly crossed the line was the power stunt. One night I came down to the dock and noticed the cabin lights were out. The entire yacht had lost shore power, my refrigerators, my navigation systems, even my security feed. The HOA had cut off the power line that ran from their grid to my slip. When I confronted Karen the next morning, she was sipping iced tea on her porch, like a villain from a soap opera. Oh, that. We had to disconnect non-compliant vessels. Community policy. Community policy, I asked. You mean your policy? She tilted her head. Same thing, really. I wanted to scream. But years of working with bureaucrats had taught me one thing: anger is currency. If you spend it too early, you end up broke. So instead I smiled. Understood, I said. I'll make a note. And I did. Literally. In a notebook labeled HOA Evidence. Every letter, every call, every photo of her standing too close to my property line, I logged it all. But Karen wasn't done. She called an emergency HOA meeting to propose an amendment. No watercraft exceeding 55 feet allowed within Baycrest Marina. She passed it with her loyal board members, the kind who voted however she told them to. Then she mailed me the updated bylaws, with a note written in neat cursive, effective immediately. Compliance expected within 10 days. 10 days. I read it under the glow of my deck lights, the water lapping against the hull, and for a moment I almost admired her audacity. She'd just rewritten the rules to target me retroactively. I didn't react. Instead, I did what engineers do best. I checked the fine print. See, most residents didn't realize something important. The Baycrest HOA didn't actually own the marina. The HOA managed community spaces, the clubhouse parking lots, gardens, but the waterfront itself was leased from a private company called Baycrest Harbor Holdings, LLC. I remembered that name. I'd seen it years ago in an investment portfolio. It was one of the small assets I'd acquired during my corporate exit, a holding company I'd left under my own management trust. Curious, I made a few calls. 2 days later, my lawyer confirmed it. I was the majority owner of Baycrest Harbor Holdings, LLC. In other words, I owned the docks. The slips, the piers, the water rights, all mine. HOA had no authority here. They'd been bluffing on borrowed land. That night I stood at the end of the dock, the moonlight reflecting off the Odyssey's hull, and smiled for the first time in months. They wanted a fight. They were standing on my battlefield. I took a deep breath, opened my notebook, and wrote one sentence underlined twice. They don't own the water. Then I called my attorney and said, let's keep quiet for now. Let them think they've won. Because in HOA, war's silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of the tide turning. For about 3 weeks, things went eerily quiet. No new letters, no angry knocks. I almost thought Karen had grown tired of me and found a new victim, maybe someone whose lawn gnomes violated community color standards. But I should have known better. When the HOA goes silent, it's not peace, it's planning. The first sign came one morning in early April. I was walking down the marina, coffee in hand, when I saw a bright red sign hammered into the ground next to my dock. Notice of Emergency Community Regulation. Effective immediately. No watercraft exceeding 55 feet permitted within Baycrest Marina. All non-compliant vessels must vacate within 72 hours. Below it in neat cursive was her signature, Karen Whitmore, HOA President. I took a slow sip of coffee. Well, I muttered, there it is. The other boat owners stood nearby, whispering. Most looked sympathetic, but none dared speak up. Karen had a way of turning people's fear into loyalty. The same folks who complained about her constant interference would nod obediently when she walked by. Power, I realized, didn't always need logic, it just needed noise. That afternoon, I received a final warning letter slid under my door. It read like a government decree. Failure to comply may result in removal fines and legal action under HOA community statutes. I called the number listed on the notice, pretending to be polite. Baycrest HOA, this is Karen speaking. Karen, hi. It's Michael Hayes, I said. Got your letter. Quick question. Where exactly do you think your community statutes apply? She laughed softly, that kind of condescending hum only bureaucrats and bad therapists have perfected. Oh, Michael, we both know your yacht is an eyesore. The community has spoken. If you don't comply, we'll handle it. Handle it, I repeated. Got it. Mind if I record this call? Click. She hung up. The next few days were a circus. HOA members showed up with measuring tapes, clipboards, and bright orange vests, walking around like they were part of the Coast Guard. One guy in cargo shorts tried to measure my hull with a construction ruler and dropped it into the water. Karen stood behind them, pointing at things and whispering into her phone. I just sat on my deck, drinking lemonade, watching the show. That night, I checked the marina's security cameras. They'd been tampered with. 3 feeds were suddenly offline. I replaced the memory cards myself, then set up my own hidden cameras, one near the gangway, one under the dock, and one facing the parking lot. Years of engineering had taught me how to think like a saboteur. Sure enough, the next morning one of my power cables was neatly cut. The shore water line had been disconnected too. So, I went to the HOA office in person. It was a converted clubhouse, marble floors, fake plants, and motivational posters about community spirit. Karen was there, sitting behind her desk like a queen at court. "Karen," I began, keeping my voice calm, "you've cut power to private property. That's a violation of state law." She smiled sweetly. "We're simply enforcing standards of safety." "Safety?" I asked. "You think pulling live electrical lines in the rain is safe?" Karen tapped her clipboard. "You're not welcome here, Michael. The board has voted unanimously. Your yacht must go." "Funny," I said, "because I just checked the property maps. You don't actually own this dock." Her eyes flickered for a moment, just a second of uncertainty before she regained her composure. "The HOA governs all community areas," she snapped. "No," I said, leaning closer. "You manage them, and this marina isn't yours to manage." The color drained slightly from her face, but she forced a grin. "Then we'll see what the county says." And she did exactly that. Within 48 hours, I had 2 county inspectors, 1 fire marshal, and an environmental safety officer, all knocking on my hull. Someone guess who had filed anonymous complaints about hazardous waste and illegal modifications. Each of them found nothing. Still, every report meant another delay, another fee, another nuisance. Karen wasn't trying to win legally. She was trying to wear me down. Meanwhile, she began her real campaign: public opinion. I started seeing posts on the neighborhood Facebook group. "Millionaire blocks marina access." "Selfish outsider refuses to respect community." "HOA stands strong against arrogance." She even uploaded a photo of my yacht with the caption, "When money floats, manners sink." By the end of the week, I was receiving hate mail from strangers. One person threw a rock through my truck window with a note attached, "Move your ship or we will." For a moment I felt the anger rise like the tide. I wanted to retaliate, to shout, to expose her right there in front of everyone. But again I remembered my rule: don't spend your anger early. Instead, I turned to strategy. I spent nights in my small marina office going through every document related to Baycrest. I traced ownership histories, tax filings, HOA amendments, every line of small print Karen had built her little empire on. And the more I read, the more I saw cracks. The HOA had been overstepping for years, charging dock maintenance fees without jurisdiction, collecting taxes under false pretenses, even funding private events with community money. It was a house built on sand, and she was too busy bullying boat owners to notice the tide coming in. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She hired a lawyer, one of those loud TV types with a spray tan, and sent me a cease and desist letter for defamation. My crime: mentioning in a community email that I own the marina's water rights. The irony was delicious. So I sent her a polite response. "Dear Mrs. Whitmore, thank you for your letter. Please be advised that your HOA's new marina rule violates Florida State Property Law Section 327.6. I recommend consulting an actual maritime attorney before further embarrassment. Respectfully, Michael Hayes, owner, Baycrest Harbor Holdings, LLC." I didn't sign it homeowner, I signed it owner. The reaction came fast. Karen called an emergency HOA meeting that same week. This time she filled the clubhouse with her loyalists and even invited a local reporter. When I arrived, cameras were already rolling. She gave me that triumphant smile, the kind people wear right before a public execution. "Mr. Hayes," she said into the microphone, "we have received word that you claim ownership over this marina. That is categorically false." I walked to the front and placed a thick folder on the podium. Inside was the original property deed notarized with the corporate seal of Baycrest Harbor Holdings. "You might want to check your sources," I said quietly. The reporter leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitmore, is this true?" Karen's voice wavered. "These documents are irrelevant. The HOA speaks for the community." The crowd began murmuring. For the first time, her control was slipping. But she wasn't done. When cornered people like Karen don't retreat, they detonate. The very next night, a maintenance worker reported seeing a tugboat maneuvering near my slip around midnight. By dawn, half the dock was roped off. A new sign appeared: HOA Safety Operation Vessel Removal in Progress. I ran down to the water. My security feed showed men in reflective vests attaching ropes to the Odyssey's hull. Karen stood behind them holding a flashlight like a director on a movie set. That was when I realized she wasn't bluffing. She was actually going to try and remove a $15 million yacht by force. As the tugboat engines roared, the wind picked up. Rain began to fall. One of the workers yelled something, but the sound was drowned by thunder. And through the chaos, Karen's voice rang out shrill and cold. "Push it off the dock. HOA authorization granted." I didn't move. I didn't scream. I just pulled out my phone, zoomed in, and hit record. Let her bury herself on camera. She thought she was sinking my pride. But in truth, she'd just launched her own destruction. It started with thunder. Not the distant kind that warns you gently. This was the kind that cracks the sky in half, echoing through the marina like cannon fire. The storm rolled in fast from the Gulf, swallowing what was left of the sunset. I was in my cabin going over invoices when my phone buzzed. Alert motion detected. Dock camera tres. I glanced at the screen and froze. Through the grainy night feed, I saw flashlights glinting off wet metal. 2 men in reflective vests were climbing aboard the Odyssey. A third stood near the dock winch. Then the camera tilted, and in the beam of the floodlight I saw her. Karen Whitmore. Pink raincoat, umbrella, clipboard. Even in a storm she dressed for control. She pointed toward the bow of my yacht and shouted something. The camera mic barely picked up. "Get it off my dock." For a second, I thought maybe this was another scare tactic, one of her symbolic gestures for social media. But then I saw the tugboat. A real industrial tugboat, about 40 feet long, pushing slowly into the marina. Its diesel engine growled through the rain. A thick steel cable hung from its stern, snaking toward the Odyssey. They were actually doing it. I grabbed my jacket and ran out into the storm. By the time I reached the pier, the rain was slicing sideways, soaking everything. The water churned black and angry. The tugboat's spotlight cut through the mist, illuminating Karen and her hired men as they looped the cable around my yacht's hull cleats. "What do you think you're doing?" I shouted over the storm. Karen turned hair plastered to her face, eyes shining with something between rage and satisfaction. "Removing a non-compliant vessel," she yelled. "Community order must be restored. That's private property." "Not anymore. You had your chance to cooperate." The tugboat's horn blared. The cable went taut. The Odyssey groaned under the tension. I could hear the aluminum railing creak and the fenders squeal against the dock. "Stop," I barked, waving my arms. "You'll tear the hull." One of the workers hesitated, glancing at Karen. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" "Do it," she screamed. "HOA authority overrides this nonsense." The tugboat accelerated, dragging the yacht sideways. The cable ripped against the cleat, sending sparks as metal scraped metal. I felt the vibration in my chest like a heartbeat going wrong. Then came a deafening crack. The starboard cleat snapped off. The tugboat lurched. The cable whipped across the dock, slicing through the rain like a steel whip. One of the men ducked just in time. It hit a light post behind him, shattering the bulb. Sparks rained down on the wet wood, sizzling. Karen shrieked. "Keep pulling." The tugboat pressed forward again. The yacht jerked violently, slamming against the pier. The hull groaned, a deep, shattering sound like something alive breaking. I knew that sound. I'd heard it once during my Navy days, the death cry of a vessel losing its integrity. Then the deck lights flickered and went dark. Water surged over the side, flooding the engine compartment. The Odyssey began to list, first a few degrees, then 10, then 20. The storm howled like it was cheering her on. I stepped closer, rainwater splashing around my boots, filming everything with my phone. "Karen, you just committed felony property destruction. Don't you dare film me," she shrieked. "This is an HOA operation." Lightning flashed, freezing the scene in white light, her outstretched arm, the men struggling with ropes, the tugboat's engine coughing smoke. And then, with a slow, almost graceful tilt, the Odyssey gave in. The stern dipped the bow, rose slightly, and the sea swallowed her with a final hollow gasp. The water boiled as air escaped the sinking hull. Furniture cushions and shattered glass bubbled to the surface. My yacht, my second chance, my masterpiece was gone. Karen stood at the edge of the dock, breathing hard makeup streaked down her cheeks. "You see," she shouted over the thunder. "This is what happens when you defy the HOA." I said nothing. I just walked past her, slow and deliberate, like a man walking away from a burning bridge. My boots echoed against the planks. The tugboat crew stepped aside. Even they looked uneasy now. I stopped at the end of the dock and turned around. "Hope your clipboard's waterproof," I said quietly. "You'll need it in court." Then I left. The next morning, the marina looked like a battlefield. The storm had passed, leaving behind calm water and wreckage. Bits of fiberglass washed up near the pylons, glinting like seashells. Seagulls perched on floating debris, cushions, ropes, pieces of my railing. Karen was there early, of course, giving interviews. A local news van was parked nearby. She stood in front of the camera with her arms folded, pretending to look noble. Last night's unfortunate incident was a necessary act of community safety, she declared. The yacht was unstable and posed environmental risks. We did what we had to do. The reporter nodded sympathetically, clearly enjoying the drama. And the owner, Karen sighed dramatically. He was uncooperative. We hope he'll understand that rules exist for everyone's good. I watched the broadcast later that afternoon from my office, coffee in hand, surrounded by the scent of salt and diesel. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing emails, messages, articles. The HOA had released an official statement claiming they'd acted with county approval. They even attached a letter stamped with the words, Emergency Safety Enforcement. Only it wasn't from the county. It was printed on HOA letterhead. Sloppy, predictable, and illegal. I didn't reply. I didn't go public. Not yet. Instead, I made 4 calls to my insurance agent, my attorney, the State Maritime Authority, and the FBI's local field office. The insurance representative, a woman named Dana, sounded sympathetic at first until she read the HOA's claim. Mr. Hayes, if the incident is categorized as a community safety measure, your coverage might be... I cut her off. Dana, listen to me carefully. That dock, that water, and that yacht, they're all mine. The HOA had no jurisdiction. Send an investigator. Bring a camera. There was silence. Then she said, understood. That week, investigators arrived. They took photos of the damaged dock, the severed cables, the tugboat tracks on the sandbar. They asked Karen for permits. She provided none, only her own memos and community safety policies. Meanwhile, I compiled everything. The video footage from my cameras, multiple angles. The audio recording of Karen authorizing the removal. The fake emergency notice signed under HOA letterhead. The corporate registration showing Baycrest Harbor Holdings, my company, as the legal owner of the marina. When my lawyer, a silver-haired woman named Elaine Porter, reviewed it all, she gave a low whistle. She's cooked, Elaine said. Completely cooked. What do you want to do? Nothing, I said. Not yet. Elaine frowned. Michael, she destroyed your property. I know, I said. But if I act now, she'll play the victim. Let her celebrate a little longer. The higher she climbs, the harder she'll fall. Elaine smiled. You've done this before. Not with boats, I said. With people. Over the next few days, the HOA basked in its victory. Karen held a community appreciation brunch to celebrate the restoration of aesthetic harmony. She even had balloons printed that said Clean Marina, Clear Conscience. Neighbors posed for photos. The local newspaper ran a piece titled, HOA Restores Order After Yacht Dispute. I attended the brunch. Yes, I showed up in sunglasses and a rain jacket, quiet as ever. People whispered when I walked in. Karen's smile faltered for a second, then she put on her PR face. Mr. Hayes, she said sweetly. So good to see you. I assume you've come to make peace. Something like that, I said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a single page, a formal notice of trespass and property destruction claim, with my company's logo on top. Effective immediately, I said softly. Baycrest HOA and its officers are prohibited from conducting any operations within Baycrest Marina. She blinked confusion flickering across her face. You can't issue this. I can, I said, smiling faintly. I own the marina. Her laugh was nervous forced. That's ridiculous. Check the county records, I said, turning to leave. I'll wait. The entire room went silent. I didn't look back. I just walked out, leaving her standing there, the paper trembling in her hand, as the first cracks began to form in her little empire. There's a particular kind of silence that comes after a public humiliation. It's thick, heavy, almost sticky. For the first time since I'd moved into Baycrest, I could walk down the marina without hearing Karen's voice echoing across the water. Her pastel blazers disappeared. Her usual swarm of board members avoided eye contact. The same people who once saluted her clipboard now crossed the street when she passed by. But I didn't celebrate yet. Silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means the storm is turning back toward shore. After the brunch incident, Karen locked herself in the HOA office for nearly a week. Curtains drawn, phone lines, busy meetings by appointment only. The rumors flew faster than the seagulls that she was hiring, new lawyers that she'd contacted the county commissioner, even that she'd spoken to a private investigator to uncover something on me. I kept my routine, the same sunrise walk, dock inspection, a cup of coffee by the water. I wanted her to think I'd moved on. In reality, I was preparing my counterattack. Elaine, my attorney, met me at a diner downtown that Tuesday. The place smelled like bacon grease and old salt, but it was quiet, perfect for what we needed to discuss. Michael, she said, sliding a stack of papers across the table. You've got more leverage than I thought. You don't just own the docks, you own the water rights. The HOA's charter explicitly says their jurisdiction ends at the property line of Baycrest Shores, not the marina itself. I leaned back, smiling slightly. So they've been governing a place they don't own. Exactly. And more than that, they've been using community funds to do it. She flipped open a ledger. Inside were years of financial statements from the HOA. The numbers didn't lie. Tens of thousands of dollars marked as marina beautification, dock safety, and water maintenance, all spent on property they had no right to manage. Fraudulent allocation of funds, Elaine said. If we take this to the state attorney's office, Karen's entire board could be charged. I stirred my coffee slowly. Let's not rush. I want to know how deep the rot goes first. Elaine raised an eyebrow. You're planning something, aren't you? I smiled. Always. Over the next few days, I began quietly building a team. Not a task force, not a battalion, just a few professionals who understood the power of patience. First, I hired Blake Turner, a forensic accountant with a background in HOA audits. He'd once uncovered a $2 million embezzlement case in Palm Beach. Blake had the kind of enthusiasm only accountants can have for scandal. Then came Lydia, a freelance investigator with contacts in the IRS. She didn't talk much, but she didn't need to. Within 48 hours, she had already pulled property liens, tax filings, and payment trails connected to Karen's emergency tugboat operation. When she sent me the report, I almost laughed. The HOA had paid for the tugboat, using the community's storm repair fund money collected from residents' annual dues. Karen had falsified a storm hazard maintenance invoice, claiming the Odyssey was debris blocking the waterway after last year's hurricane. The twist: that hurricane never even reached our county. Worse still, she'd paid the tugboat company through a private account her own. I stared at the screen, a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. So she didn't just sink my yacht, I muttered. She used stolen money to do it. Elaine's response was immediate. That's embezzlement, wire, fraud, and destruction of property. You could file federal charges right now. But I wasn't ready yet. I wanted her downfall to be permanent, not just public. 2 weeks later, Karen resurfaced. Literally, she started showing up at the marina again, walking her little white poodle like nothing had happened. But the swagger was gone. She moved quickly, avoided eye contact, and refused to answer questions from residents. Then came the email blast. Subject A. Message from your HOA president, setting the record straight. She wrote a long statement claiming that misinformation had spread maliciously and that certain individuals, meaning me, were trying to destabilize the harmony of Baycrest. She even attached a fake document proving HOA oversight of the marina, a poorly photoshopped letter with mismatched signatures. It was desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. The residents started doubting her. Some forwarded the email to me asking, "Is this true?" I didn't reply, "Not yet." I wanted the distrust to ferment a little longer. Behind the scenes, Blake and Lydia found even more dirt. Karen had been diverting HOA maintenance funds into a shell account for nearly 5 years. Landscaping, security upgrades, holiday decor, most of it fake. The money went to luxury resorts, online shopping, and a second home in Naples under her cousin's name. It was time to end her little empire. Elaine drafted the formal complaint: property destruction federal level due to value exceeding $10,000, wire fraud, and misappropriation of community funds, falsification of official documents, conspiracy to defraud under HOA charter. She filed it under Baycrest Harbor Holdings, LLC versus Baycrest HOA. A neat irony, considering the HOA had spent years pretending to regulate me. But the real masterpiece was what came next. Using my ownership rights, I called a special shareholders meeting for Baycrest Harbor Holdings, the corporate entity that technically leased the entire marina to the HOA. The purpose to review contract compliance and discuss possible termination of the HOA's marina privileges. I invited them all: Karen, her vice president Gary, her treasurer, her secretary, the whole clipboard army. When they walked into the small conference room at the county office building, they looked confused. Karen tried to take control immediately. "Mr. Hayes, this meeting is out of order. The HOA charter clearly states—" "This isn't an HOA meeting," I interrupted, sliding a folder across the table. "This is a corporate compliance review. You're here as tenants." She froze. "Tenants. Yes. You've been leasing this marina for 8 years. You never paid the maintenance fees or renewed your usage license. Technically, you've been trespassing on private property since 2019. Her treasurer, a nervous man with sweat stains under his collar, whispered, "Karen, is that true?" She shot him a glare sharp enough to kill small animals. I leaned forward. Effective immediately, the HOA's access to Baycrest Marina is revoked. The docks, storage, sheds, and utility access points are under new management. Karen slammed her hand on the table. You can't do this. I smiled. I already did. You'll find the notice posted at the entrance right next to your emergency regulation sign. Her face flushed bright red. You'll regret this, Michael. I have connections. You think owning some water makes you powerful? No, I said softly. Evidence does. Then I stood collecting my files. Oh, and Karen, I'd advise against deleting any emails. Federal investigators tend to frown on that. Her eyes widened. Federal? Elaine handed her a copy of the complaint. You'll be hearing from the Department of Justice within the week. Have a lovely evening. That night, for the first time in months, I walked along the docks without feeling the weight of her shadow. The air was still. The sea reflected the moon in perfect ripples. But I knew it wasn't over yet. People like Karen don't surrender, they self-destruct. Sure enough, 2 days later, she tried to spin the story again. A local TV reporter came to the marina interviewing her as she pretended to cry on camera. He destroyed my life, she sobbed. That yacht was unsafe. I was protecting families. But this time I had something she didn't proof. When the segment aired that evening, the station had already fact-checked her claims with county records and the footage from my cameras, which I had anonymously submitted. The anchors ended the story with one devastating line: Baycrest HOA may face criminal investigation for fraud and property destruction. Sources confirm federal authorities are reviewing evidence. By morning, the HOA office was empty. Karen didn't show up. Her poodle was gone. The pink Lexus, too. But running wouldn't save her. The law moves slow, but when it moves, it's tidal. A week later, Elaine called. The FBI's Property Crimes Division wants to meet. They've opened a case file. IRS, too. Good, I said. Let's make sure they have everything. Oh, they do, she said, almost laughing. You kept better records than most police departments. And as she said that, I realized something. The real victory wasn't just in proving her wrong, it was in proving that quiet persistence beats loud arrogance every single time. I looked out across the marina, at the empty slip where the Odyssey used to rest. The water was calm again, like it was waiting. Karen had tried to drown my dream. Now it was her turn to sink. The first hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in late September, inside the federal courthouse downtown, a building so clean and cold, it looked like it was carved from pure intimidation. I arrived early wearing a gray suit that still smelled faintly of sea salt. Elaine walked beside me holding a leather folder filled with exhibits, photographs, invoices, emails, videos, every shred of evidence we had collected. I wasn't nervous. I'd been waiting for this. When Karen arrived, she did what Karen always did, turned an embarrassment into a performance. She stepped out of her Lexus in a bright lavender suit, Pearl's gleaming chin lifted high. Behind her were 2 lawyers in tailored suits and a small entourage of HOA loyalists who still believed she was protecting the community. She even waved to a local news crew waiting outside, giving them her best tragic heroine smile. Elaine smirked. She still thinks this is a HOA meeting. Let her, I said. The camera's not her friend anymore. Inside the courtroom buzzed quietly as people took their seats. I recognized some of the residents, the same folks who'd once applauded when the HOA fined me for having unauthorized decorative lighting. Now they whispered to each other, curious how the tables had turned. The bailiff called order. All rise. Judge Evelyn Mercer entered mid-60s. Sharp eyes, zero tolerance for nonsense. I liked her already. Karen's attorney, a loud man with a Florida tan, and too much confidence, started the opening statement. Your Honor, he said dramatically, this case is about community safety. My client, Mrs. Whitmore, acted in good faith to protect the residents of Baycrest from a dangerous, oversized vessel. Her actions were reasonable, necessary, and within the HOA's jurisdiction. Judge Mercer raised an eyebrow. You're saying your client authorized the destruction of a $15 million yacht as a safety measure? The lawyer nodded. Yes, Your Honor. The vessel... She cut him off. Do you have a single legal statute granting an HOA the power to order maritime removals? He stammered. Well, the bylaws don't override state law counsel. Try again. You could almost hear the oxygen leave his lungs. Elaine rose calmly. Your Honor, the plaintiff would like to introduce Exhibit A, a video recording from multiple security cameras showing the defendant personally directing the removal of the yacht, the Odyssey, without authorization. The monitors flickered on. The courtroom watched in silence as rain poured, lightning flashed, and Karen's voice screamed, "Push it off the dock." The judge leaned forward, unimpressed but focused. "That's her voice." Elaine nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." You'll also notice the tugboat operator asking whether they had legal clearance, to which Mrs. Whitmore replied, and I quote, "HOA authority overrides this nonsense." A few people in the gallery gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh, she's done." Karen squirmed in her seat. Her lawyer tried to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand. "Sit down, counsel." Elaine continued. "Now, Exhibit B, financial records obtained via subpoena. The HOA paid the tugboat company through a private account owned by Mrs. Whitmore. The transaction was labeled as storm debris removal, even though there was no recorded storm in Baycrest that week." She paused for effect. "We verified this with the National Weather Service." The judge scribbled something down. "Go on." Exhibit C, the Marina ownership deed. Baycrest Harbor Holdings LLC, registered under my client's name. The HOA therefore had zero legal authority to operate, regulate, or remove property from the marina. The judge took the folder, scanning the pages carefully. "So, Mrs. Whitmore, let me clarify. You destroyed property on land and water your HOA didn't own using misappropriated community funds." Karen stood up, her voice trembling. "That's not true. The marina is part of our community. We've always managed it." "Managed," the judge interrupted, "isn't the same as owned. I was protecting property values." The judge's tone hardened. "By sinking a yacht?" Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled out of water. Her lawyer jumped in, clearly panicking. "Your Honor, my client acted under a mistaken belief of authority," which Elaine interjected smoothly would still make it negligence at best and fraud at worst. The judge nodded. "Proceed with your evidence." For the next 2 hours, Elaine dismantled the HOA's case piece by piece. She presented email threads showing Karen pressuring board members to approve her new regulations retroactively, text messages where she mocked residents for questioning her, and financial statements revealing she had redirected over $80 0-inches HOA funds to personal expenses, spa treatments, vacations, even a payment labeled Lexus Service Leadership Vehicle. When it was finally our turn to rest, Elaine closed her binder with a satisfying snap. "The plaintiff rests, Your Honor." Judge Mercer turned to Karen's table. "Defense." Karen's lawyer looked pale. "Your Honor, in light of new evidence, we request a brief recess to confer with our client." "Granted," the judge said. 10 minutes. As they huddled together, Karen whispered furiously, gesturing with manic energy. At one point, she pointed directly at me. Her lawyer shook his head. The tension between them was thick enough to choke on. When court resumed, he spoke in a quieter voice. "Your Honor, the defense would like to propose a settlement." Elaine folded her arms. "We're listening." He cleared his throat. "Mrs. Whitmore is willing to issue a public apology, resign from the HOA, and pay restitution." "Denied," I said, standing up before Elaine could respond. The judge glanced at me. "Mr. Hayes, please." "With respect, Your Honor, I said this isn't just about money or apologies. This is about accountability. She destroyed my yacht, harassed residents, and abused power for years. If she walks away with a fine and a headline, she'll do it again somewhere else." The room went dead silent. The judge nodded slowly. "Understood. Proceed with judgment." An hour later, the ruling came down like thunder. The HOA was found liable for property destruction, fraud, and misappropriation of funds. They were ordered to pay full restitution, the appraised value of the Odyssey, plus damages and legal fees. Total $22.4 million. Karen herself faced separate criminal investigation for wire fraud and falsifying documents. The judge's final words were simple. "Let this serve as a reminder: authority without ownership is just arrogance wearing a name tag." The gavel fell. I exhaled, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying finally leaving my chest. Karen sat frozen, her face drained of all color. Her pearls hung crooked like even they'd given up. As we walked out of the courtroom, reporters swarmed the hallway. "Mr. Hayes, any comment?" I stopped for a moment, meeting their cameras with a calm smile. "They said my yacht was too big," I said. Turns out their ego was bigger. Outside, the afternoon sun hit the courthouse steps, and for the first time in months, it felt warm again. Elaine handed me a document, the final judgment stamped and sealed. "Congratulations," she said. "You're officially the owner of a victory worth more than any yacht." I laughed softly. "Maybe, but I still miss the damn boat." She smiled. "Then build another one. Just make it bigger." The news spread fast. HOA president found liable in multi-million-dollar yacht case. The video of Karen screaming in the storm went viral, millions of views in a week. Memes popped up online, her shouting, "Push it off," next to captions like, "When HOA Karen meets the Coast Guard." Her board resigned within days. The HOA's insurance dropped them. Their accounts were frozen pending federal review. Karen's mansion went up for sale. No buyers. She'd become radioactive, the suburban cautionary tale no one wanted to live next to. As for me, I went back to the marina. The dock was quiet again, the water smooth, reflecting the orange of the evening sky. The slip where the Odyssey once rested was empty, but not forever. In the distance, I saw construction crews setting up scaffolding, the first stages of rebuilding. "New project?" one of the workers asked. "Yeah," I said, watching the waves roll in. "Something unsinkable." The morning after the verdict, the entire Baycrest neighborhood felt quieter. Not peaceful, quiet, stunned quiet, like the air after an explosion when people are still figuring out what's left standing. For years, Karen's voice had been the soundtrack of the community, the clacking of her heels on the pavement, the snap of her clipboard, the endless speeches about preserving harmony. Now her office sat dark. The blinds closed the mailbox, overflowing with angry letters, and a faded banner still taped to the clubhouse door that read, "Baycrest HOA, together we shine." The shine part had been peeled off. That morning I received a voicemail from one of the board members, Gary, the treasurer, who'd spent most meetings nodding along to whatever Karen said. His voice trembled. "Michael, this is Gary. We just wanted to say we're sorry. We didn't know half the stuff she was doing. If there's anything we can do to make it right." I deleted it, not out of spite, just closure. The time for apologies had passed. By noon, the news van started showing up again. The story had gone national now. Headlines blared across morning shows and YouTube thumbnails. HOA president destroys $15. Million yacht gets destroyed in court. The Karen who sank her own reputation. Homeowner outsmarts HOA in legendary legal reversal. Memes were everywhere. Someone edited the footage of the Odyssey sinking with the Titanic theme song. Another clip showed Karen shouting, "Push it off," remixed into a dance track called HOA Drop the Boat Remix. It hit 500,000 views in 3 days. Irony had finally caught up to her. Elaine called that afternoon. "The restitution funds are already processing," she said. "Between HOA insurance and her personal assets, you'll recover about $16 million up front. The rest will come in installments, assuming she doesn't declare bankruptcy." "Can she?" I asked. "She can try," Elaine said dryly, "but fraud and malicious destruction judgments aren't dischargeable in bankruptcy. The law actually has a sense of humor about that." I chuckled watching a pelican land on one of the rebuilt pylons. Guess karma's got good lawyers. The following week, county officials came to audit the HOA. Turns out Karen's empire had been built on a web of unpaid taxes, fake invoices, and missing funds. The IRS opened an inquiry. The FBI expanded their case to include mail fraud and obstruction. The board resigned en masse. Their Facebook group, once a hub of sanctimonious posts about lawn heights and recycling bins, went completely silent. Baycrest had no HOA now. No more fines, no more inspections, no more pink blazer patrols. For the first time, the residents were free, and it terrified them. A few days later, I was approached at the marina by a young couple from Lot 9, the same people who once signed Karen's petitions. The husband, nervous, scratched the back of his neck. "Mr. Hayes, we just wanted to say thank you for, standing up to her. We didn't think anyone could." His wife added softly, "She fined us $300 last year because our hydrangeas were too vibrant." I smiled. "I'd refund you myself if I could." She laughed. "We'll settle for seeing her gone." Not everyone was so gracious. A handful of Karen's loyalists tried to rally. They circulated a petition online called "Restore Order to Baycrest," claiming that without the HOA, the neighborhood would descend into chaos. Their rally drew 6 people. 2 left after 10 minutes when they realized no one was filming. A week later, I stood on the same dock where everything had begun. The storm had washed away, both literally and metaphorically. The wreckage was gone, replaced by clean new pylons and polished railings. Construction crews were finishing the last touches on the new boathouse, built stronger, smarter, and entirely mine. A sign hung near the entrance, freshly painted in bold navy letters, "Odyssey Harbor, private property, management by Hayes Maritime Holdings." Underneath, smaller text read, "Community access by invitation only." It wasn't revenge, it was justice packaged neatly in corporate policy. Standing there, I felt something I hadn't in months. Calm. No anger, no adrenaline, just the slow rhythm of waves tapping against the dock, the gulls overhead, the faint hum of distant boats. Then I heard footsteps behind me. It was Elaine. She handed me a folder. FBI's final update, she said. They've filed charges, 2 counts of fraud, 1 of destruction of property, 1 of tax evasion. Karen's facing up to 30 years. I opened the folder, scanning the pages. The evidence list was impressive. Bank transfers, witness statements, HOA meeting minutes. One line caught my eye. Subject attempted to delete files. Recovered through cloud backup. I grinned. Of course she did. Elaine tucked her hands into her coat pockets. You did it, Michael. You won. I shook my head. No, we restored balance. That's better than winning. She smiled. So what now? I rebuild, I said. But not just the yacht, the place itself. That evening, I hosted a small gathering at the Marina, just a few neighbors, the workers who'd helped rebuild, and Elaine. No speeches, no reporters. Just good food, good music, and the sound of the sea. We toasted to new beginnings. Someone joked that I should run for HOA president. Everyone laughed, even me. As the sun sank below the horizon, I looked at the empty slip where the Odyssey had once floated. The reflection of the sunset shimmered across the water, turning gold, just like the day she sank. It didn't hurt anymore. 2 months later, word came that Karen's mansion had been foreclosed. She'd sold off her Lexus, the jewelry, the designer, suits, everything. I heard she was living in a small rental near Tampa, awaiting sentencing. A news outlet tracked her down for an interview. She refused to talk, but the camera caught her walking into a grocery store dressed in gray sweats, pushing a cart full of discount cereal. The internet had a field day. Someone captioned it, "When you lose the yacht war and end up on aisle 5. Cruel maybe, but pudic." Meanwhile, Baycrest began to heal. Without the HOA breathing down their necks, residents started to help one another again. The same people who once filed complaints now shared tools and painted fences together. The lawns grew a little wilder, the houses a little more human, and somehow it looked better that way. One afternoon, as I was checking the new dock sensors, Gary, the ex-treasurer, approached again. "Hey, Michael," he said awkwardly. "We're forming a new community association. Voluntary, not mandatory this time. More about cooperation than control. You should join." I raised an eyebrow. "You sure you want me on the board?" He laughed nervously. "Honestly, we'd feel safer if you were." Later that night, I sat on the end of the dock legs, dangling over the water. The air smelled of salt and sawdust, fresh construction and fresh starts. I thought about the Odyssey, about how something beautiful had to sink so that something stronger could rise. In the distance, lights flickered from the shipyard where my new vessel was being built. Bigger, better, designed with reinforced hull plating. The builders had named it Project Phoenix. It wasn't my idea, but it fit. I watched the stars reflected on the water, thinking about Karen, about power, about how easily pride drowns itself when it refuses to float with truth. Maybe that was the real difference between us. She built her authority on fear. I built mine on patience. The storm had taken my yacht, but it had also stripped away every illusion, hers, mine, everyone's. Now, standing in the quiet glow of the Marina lights, I realized something simple and profound. I didn't just win against an HOA. I reclaimed my peace. And in the end, that was worth far more than $15 million. 6 months later, the Marina no longer looked like a battleground. The air smelled of varnish and sea breeze instead of diesel and rage. The sound of hammering had been replaced by laughter and guitar music from the workers finishing the last pier. On calm mornings, fog rolled in like silk over the water, wrapping the rebuilt docks in gold. And right in the center, resting where the Odyssey once stood, floated her successor, the Phoenix. She was bigger, stronger, and quieter, a 90-foot testament to second chances. The hull gleamed like molten bronze, her name etched in silver script on the stern. But she wasn't just a yacht, she was a statement. She said, "You can try to drown me, but I'll rise again anyway." On the day of her christening, I hosted a small gathering. No media, no speeches, just friends, neighbors, and the few people who had stood beside me when everything went under. Elaine came in a blue sundress, pretending she wasn't tearing up. The shipwrights wore work boots and wide smiles. Even Gary, the ex-treasurer, showed up carrying a cooler of beer. "Never thought I'd say this," he muttered, "but this place looks better without HOA signs everywhere." I laughed. "Freedom always looks better, Gary." We raised glasses of champagne as the sun bled orange across the bay. I smashed the ceremonial bottle against the bow, not hard enough to dent, just enough to mark the start of something new. The crowd cheered. Someone shouted, "Long live the Phoenix," and the gulls seemed to echo it overhead. But I wasn't celebrating just a boat, I was celebrating closure. Because that morning, right before the ceremony, I'd received an email from the U.S. Attorney's Office, subject line, United States versus Whitmore, sentencing summary. Karen had been convicted on all counts: property destruction, fraud, falsification of documents, and tax evasion. 25 years, no parole. The judge's remarks were poetic. This court finds that Mrs. Whitmore weaponized community trust and authority for personal gain. Such conduct corrodes the foundations of lawful society. Poetic justice. Still, when I read it, I didn't feel joy, just stillness. The kind you get after a storm when everything's been washed clean. After the party, when the marina quieted down, I took a walk along the docks. The lights reflected in the water like a trail of fire leading back to the horizon. The Phoenix swayed gently, almost breathing. I found Elaine sitting on one of the benches watching the reflections ripple. She looked over as I approached. "Hard to believe it's all over," she said. "Not over," I corrected. "Just beginning again." She smiled. "You could have walked away, Michael. Sold the marina, left this mess behind. Why rebuild here?" I stared at the calm black water. Because this place reminded me that control isn't ownership. Karen wanted to control everything: people, rules, even the water. But you can't own the tide. You can only respect it. Elaine tilted her head. "You really should write speeches." I laughed. "God forbid. I'd rather build them." Later that week, I reopened the marina officially under its new name, Odyssey Harbor, Private Marina and Veterans Fund Center. Half the slips were leased to local boaters. The other half were reserved for veterans learning maritime trades, funded entirely by the restitution money. When the local paper came for an interview, I didn't give them the revenge story they wanted. Instead, I told them about the Harbor Fund. Every dollar Karen tried to steal will go toward giving someone else a future. You don't beat greed by matching it, you beat it by outlasting it. The article ran under the headline, "From HOA War to Hope Harbor: How One Man Turned Revenge into Renewal." For the first time, people were talking about Baycrest not as a cautionary tale, but as a comeback story. 2 months later, something unexpected happened. A letter arrived in my office mailbox, handwritten, no return address, postmarked from a federal facility in Tallahassee. The handwriting was unmistakable, tight, elegant, full of ego. Karen. I hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page. "Mr. Hayes, they tell me you rebuilt the marina. Congratulations. You were right about the law. You were wrong about me. I didn't want to destroy you, I wanted to prove I mattered. But when people stop listening, you start screaming. You film the screaming, but never the silence before it. Enjoy your ocean, Michael. Mine's smaller now, but it's quiet. KW." I read it twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer. Not forgiveness, not pity, just closure. She'd finally learned what control without compassion leads to emptiness. As the weeks turned into months, Odyssey Harbor grew into something larger than I'd imagined. Veterans who'd never stepped on a boat before now worked the docks restoring old vessels for charity. Locals visited every weekend for community markets. The old HOA office was turned into a maritime museum, the sign still hanging crookedly outside, a reminder of what happens when pride steers the ship. Sometimes I'd catch tourists taking photos beside it, laughing at the irony: HOA rules enforced. Underneath it, someone had spray-painted "Not Anymore." And I let it stay. On a quiet evening in December, I took the Phoenix out for her first full night voyage. The water shimmered under the moonlight, calm and infinite. As the engines hummed, I thought back to the first time I saw the Odyssey sinking, that moment of helplessness, that weight in my chest as something I loved disappeared beneath the surface. Now sailing under a star-filled sky, I realized something I hadn't before. Sometimes you have to lose what you built to remember why you built it. When the world takes everything from you, it's not teaching you to surrender, it's teaching you to rebuild smarter, steadier, and with a better compass. I anchored near the edge of the bay, the water perfectly still, and spoke softly to no one in particular. She thought power meant control, but real power, it's knowing when to let go. The wind carried the words away, dissolving into the night. When people hear stories like mine, they focus on the revenge, the courtroom victories, the fines, the poetic justice. But that's not the real story. The real story is what happens after the noise fades. When the cameras leave, when the outrage cools, when you're left with an empty dock and a choice: rebuild or walk away. I chose to rebuild, not because I wanted to prove anything to Karen or the HOA, but because rebuilding is the quietest, most powerful form of revenge there is. It says, "You didn't break me, you refined me." In life, you'll meet people who mistake power for ownership: bosses, neighbors, officials, even friends. They'll try to write rules over what isn't theirs. Let them. paper fades, deeds endure. Because true strength isn't in shouting or punishing or proving you're right. It's in standing firm, calm as the tide, waiting for the storm to pass, and then planting something beautiful right where the wreckage used to be. So, if someone ever tries to sink your peace, remember this tides turn, storms end, and the ocean never stays angry for long. Watch until the end of your own storm, the calm is worth it.